All right, so let's move into cultural competency. So now that we've kind of got a handle on what diversity means and what diversity looks like, how do we apply that? So deep cultural is that self-awareness. We've talked about that before, especially with our metacognition lesson. This is knowing what you believe you understand about yourself and then increasing it by increasing your understanding of others. So you have to understand what your culture is, what it looks like, and what it means to you, how you perceive and interpret things, so that you can be open to hearing other people's culture, how they perceive and understand things, and even people within your own culture, how they perceive and interpret things, because it may be different than you. So in acknowledging your own uniqueness. So remembering that not everybody approaches the world the same way that you do. You are unique. Consider your own stereotypes. We all have unconscious biases. It's just the way we are conditioned. Many of them come generationally, meaning that as we're raised by people with unconscious biases. So it's not anything that they're necessarily trying to be strongly racist or strongly sexist, but they just have these biases, and then you're raised with them, and it's almost it is so difficult to recognize with those selves, and it's an ongoing process. You're not going to just be able to pick out one and be like, "Hey, work is done. I'm great. I am woke," so to speak. It's a ongoing battle, and this applies to everybody. Everybody has unconscious biases. Some of them are good, some of them are bad, but everybody has this. We're all at risk for stereotypes based on things that we've seen. If we There are countries we've never been to, but we keep seeing these stereotypes in TV and literature. We're going to have those stereotypes about people from maybe a specific country or a specific religion. And it can be very, very dangerous, as we all know. Stereotypes acknowledge some generalizations about a group of people, but they're never ever 100% that person, because again, going back to that first point, we're all unique. It's not that we want to ignore differences, so we don't want to be what's considered colorblind, which is where people say they don't see race. We want to acknowledge race. We want to acknowledge that we're all different. And it doesn't mean another race, for example, is better or worse. It means that we're all different, and we need to acknowledge that. And if you really want to get into social justice work, you really need to learn more about what that means when we talk about systemic racism. But at the minimum, don't be colorblind, and understand that people have different perspectives and they have different struggles than you from wherever you come from. Don't apply group generalizations. This is very similar to stereotypes. So don't assume anything. Again, we talked about kind of with gender roles. We don't assume that um, all women want to have babies just because a lot of women maybe do. I always joke that I personally hate avocado. I think it's disgusting. And so I have friends that tell me they're going to take my white girl card away from me. And it's a joke, but it's just a very small example. Don't assume all white women love avocado. I do love pumpkin spice though, so that generalization does apply to me. The only way you would know either one of those is to get to know me. If I walked into a restaurant and you served me avocado only meals, I would leave because it is a gross fruit. But anyway, that is a very simple, non harmful generalization that I'm using as an example. There are certainly much more harmful ones out there. So just be really, really cautious and careful, and get to know that group or that person before you start applying generalizations. Develop that cultural sensitivity for communication, and that's important. We want open communication. You want people to be able to trust you to share their perspective, but part of that is being sensitive to their stories, and again, not asking what they are, as if they are a non-human, as if they're a dog that you're picking out at the not the vet, the shelter, right? You want to ask them more sensitive questions that just lay that kind of basic foundation for trust that you would do with anybody. Um, don't want to be abrasive. You don't want to be defensive. You just want to give them a chance to hear their story, and just the goal should be get to know them in a general way, and being sensitive to all of that. Be open to conversations. Be open to disagreements. That's okay. There's not a none of this is to say that you automatically agree with everybody with a different perspective. There is room for growth and there is room for communication, but it's the style of communication. It's using tact, it's using sensitivity to both convey your thoughts, but also really listen. Go back to our active listening chapter. Really listen to them and not just let them speak while you develop your own argument in your head and you never hear what they have to say. So going back to the meme, if somebody's trying to convince you it's a 9 and you're swearing up and down it's a 6, be open to being able to see where they're coming from instead of just waiting to shut them down and tell them about how your 6 is better. Take advantage of campus opportunities. I know this is kind of crazy right now, and it's a little bit difficult, but our student life is doing movie nights. They are doing different ways to engage you, and that's going to be your best bet to get to know other students, especially in this virtual world, and kind of see where their perspectives are and be able to share and kind of build that trust that we talked about. Take the initiative. Again, you're definitely trying to build that communication and that trust. If you're really interested in getting deeper into that cultural competency, you're going to take the initiative, maybe put yourself in some uncomfortable situations so that you can learn more. And then work through conflicts as you would any other interaction. So we kind of just talked about this as well, the 6 and the 9. Best way to work through conflicts is, again, that listening, is, again, finding a compromise where both parties may not be happy with it, right? But it's better than the win-lose style of conflict where one person gets what they want and one person doesn't. There can be a way to compromise, but that's not even an option without listening to each other. So be really, really careful with cultural competency, and using that sensitivity for communication is probably the best tool that you'll have. And remember our active listening. Remember when we talked about learning preferences, and remember, you don't always have to be right. Assess the situation, assess the conversation. There's absolutely points where you can agree to disagree, and if that's an option, use that, because you'll never be able to. No one will ever be able to fully be in your shoes and understand your perspective based on your lived experiences 100%, and which means you can't do that to somebody else. So if you're just at a pass where the 6 and the 9, you're disagreeing on it, you can't get to the other side to see it from their perspective, but at the end of the day it doesn't hurt, it's not harmful, then just agree to disagree. All right, you see a 6, I see a 9, we can move on. There are places for that. There's places that there aren't for that. There are places for that. There's definitely accommodations. These are a few. And I said this at the beginning of class, so I'm just going to say it again. If you think you need an accommodation, if you had them in high school, or if you didn't, but you thought you could benefit from them, please talk to our Student Accessibility Services office. You will talk directly with them, not your advisor, not me, because they are the ones that are trained in all of the accommodation and ADA laws and requirements. They want to keep your stuff private. They do have a process that requires usually doctor's notes, and that stays with their office. It is not shared with your faculty members. It is not shared with your advisor. It solely lives in their office to protect your privacy. And they will help you address what accommodations they can offer you and how to go about them. They give you a letter that goes to all your faculty members. And all it tells that faculty member is if you need something like the extended time on exams. That's all it says. It doesn't tell us anything about your diagnosis or what's going on with you, because that's not our business. So you can look at our SAS office, can give you a lot more information, and they can connect you to resources. So if there's something that ACC doesn't have, they can help connect you. We have some financial support. We don't have housing on campus, but I believe that they can connect you to resources that can help with that. And they can connect you to resources. Mostly we use Cap Metro for transportation access. And they may have other resources. I do know what ACC does. We have assistive technologies, and then again, those exam accommodations and academic accommodations that they can help you. Everything from having somebody take notes in class for you to having, I'm trying to think of different ones I've seen. Mostly their exam, extended time, private rooms. And then that assistive technology is huge, especially right now, that they can help you access that. All right, last point. Let's talk about some prejudice and hate. It exists. This is a small list. It exists almost against everybody. A lot of it stems around racial and ethnic minorities. We're seeing that a lot right now in the world, and then it goes down. But it extends to most groups. So this is a very short list: women, people with disabilities, older adults. I would add younger adults in there too. And by gay and lesbians, we mean the LGBTQ plus community. It can extend to anybody in that community. What we surface level see is gays and lesbians, but there's definitely a lot of violence against trans women that is not covered well in the media, and so we extend that umbrella. And then basically any group that's characterized as different, and that can change based on where your location or where you work versus where you live, when you're considered different. I also like to touch on privilege. This is important. This is not, this is being talked about more, but it's still kind of an evolving idea when we talk about it. So, a simple definition from Merriam Webster is a right or benefit that is given to some people and not to others. There's a great practice that we would have done in a face to face class called Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack from Peggy McIntosh. Um, but we tend to be conditioned that we only see racism and those, as she says, acts of meanness, meaning that we see the overt racism, whether it's name calling or you know uh, property damage, things like that. But we don't often see the invisible systems of dominance based on our group. Privilege is very, very fluid, and it's very, very hard for us to identify. And again, similar to those unconscious biases, it takes work. It's not an easy thing to just be like, oh, that's my privilege. There it is. A very, very simple example, and this is one of the first times I recognized my own privilege, was listening to a coworker and a friend um, tell a story about going to Target to get makeup. She needed like foundation or powder for her face, so something that had to match her skin color. And that particular Target didn't carry her skin color in that makeup. And that blew me away. And I know this is dumb. And there's some of you that have no idea what I'm talking about, but I've never had an issue going to a store and finding anything, band-aids, makeup, anything that's based on skin color that's meant to match your skin. I've never not been able to find my skin color. But she is mixed race, and so she couldn't find it. The store solely catered to white customers when it came to their makeup or skin color products. Um, that's a very small, again, non-harmful example of what privilege looks like, but it is very much privilege. Some of us can walk anywhere in the world and get what we need, and some of us cannot. And just sort of break it up. Again, it is impossible for me to cover every single oppressed group or every example of privilege. So this is one, again, I found on the internet. It's not something I put together, but it covers a good portion of groups when we talk about privilege and the types of oppression. And there are ones on here that we don't always think about. And so we look at, again, youth, children, young adults can be, can be considered a target group because they're often silenced. They're considered that they don't know anything by these older adults. And then you get over the age of 40, and then you have younger people who are starting to dismiss you. We talk about religion. We forget that Christian is very much a dominant religion. And you can see it. You can look at the calendars. You can look at holidays that the United States shuts down for, and they're almost always Christian holidays. We don't always acknowledge that there are other religions with other holidays out there, and that's growing and it's getting better, but it's definitely one that you just don't think about. Nobody thinks about Christmas being a Christian holiday. Nobody thinks about Easter, um, and how that's not, always celebrated by everybody, but it's very, very true. Um, Again, we can talk about all these groups, many of them that you've heard. We talked about a little bit education, how people are treated without a degree versus with a degree. This one I was a surprise to me, military service. It looks like there's groups of oppression within veterans that I wasn't aware of. We definitely, this has been in the news a lot when we talk about immigrant versus US born, and we don't always define or understand what immigrant means. We associate immigrant with illegal aliens, and that's not always the case. And so we have to be very understanding and very careful what we understand about immigrant and about that journey. And then non-English to English. As a rule, the US does not have an official language, but we've definitely seen some hate towards non-English speakers when they're speaking their native language or their most comfortable language in public settings. So these are all things to think about, and think about how much of them affect you. And if very little of them affect you, meaning you're not a person of color, um, meaning that you're not poor or the working class. Maybe you're not a woman. You don't identify in this group or 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 this group, and you identify mostly in these groups. You have a lot of privilege in the world. That's just how it is. The world is catering a lot more to you. It doesn't mean that you don't struggle. It doesn't mean that you don't have hard times and that there aren't things that you are working towards or that you find difficult. It means it's just not as difficult for you based on one of these other groups. Ways to fight prejudice. And by the way, this video is not about shaming anybody. It's just about understanding our self-awareness and our place in the world. But the best ways to fight it is to talk with others. Report those incidences. This is huge. You don't have to be the victim of prejudice to be able to do something about it. There are reporting structures. You've all had to do the video for our Title IX office, and that's who you would report most instances of prejudice to. And you can still be an ally that way. You can help celebrate diversity, make it a safe place for other people around you that are considered these definitions of quote unquote different that we talked about. Make it a safe place around you. Support groups that are working for change. You can either be involved in the group or you can find other ways to support them. It can be a donation. It can be giving them space, giving them a platform, whatever support looks like for you. And then decide that it does matter. It's not somebody else's problem. It's all of us creating that work. All right, so key takeaways about how diversity refers to all of us. So think about it again, and everything that we covered, and we did cover a lot. Diversity is not a simple subject. It's not something that I can cover in one chapter or in one video. It's going to take some work getting out there. One thing that I think was a really cool idea is whatever social media or medias you're on, follow people who disagree with you, whether it's political figures, whether it's celebrities, whether it's people that you know locally. That's a great way to give perspective. You can see the things that they're sharing and the things that they're talking about that just make a world of difference. It also screws up a lot of the algorithms so that you get a broader suggestions of whether it's ads or groups or whatever. It screws up their algorithms a little bit. So it'll give you a more diverse, if you will, range of things that are being suggested to you from these different apps. which I think is always a good thing. You can kind of see what other people are seeing. That's an easy way to kind of shift your perspective. Again, talk to people, get to know them, make safe places for them to share those life experiences. And don't be afraid of anybody that's considered, again, quote unquote, different. We're all people at the end of the day, and we're all unique. You're different to somebody else. You just may not realize it. All right, guys, and that's all I have for you. Thanks for giving me your time. Thanks so much.